The dark was not empty. It was full of held breath, of unsaid things, of the kind of quiet that comes before a truth is spoken. No stars showed through the thick clouds. No wind stirred. This was the hour when doubt feels loudest and hope feel. In the oldest part of the city stood a walled garden, long forgotten by calendars. Its iron gate was rusted open, its paths were paved with moss, and in its center grew not flowers, but a single enormous oak. A man stood in that shadow, his back against the trunk. He was not old, but he felt old today. In his hand he held a letter, thick paper, formal script. Another rejection. Not for a job, not for a grant, for a dream he had nursed in silence for 7 years. He had done everything right, studied, prepared, waited for the right season. He had watched peers bloom in sunlight, quick success, visible growth, early harvests. And he had told himself, deep roots take time. But time was running out. Bills stacked like silent judges. Family voices held that careful tone, the one that pretends not to be worried. The shadow he stood in no longer felt like patience. It felt like burial. With him stood his sister. She had brought him here. She said nothing, just watched his face in the half-light. Her silence wasn't absence, it was a question. How long do you wait for a seed to sprout when you can't even see it? From where the oak's roots broke the soil, an old gardener spoke. He hadn't been there a moment before, or perhaps he had always been there. You're reading the wrong text. His voice was like soil turning. The man looked up, startled. It's a rejection letter. I know, the gardener said, but you're reading it as an ending. Try reading it as a direction. He knelt, his fingers brushing the dark earth. Sunlight tells a seed to hurry. Shadow tells it to become. A pause. Somewhere in the distance, the first bird of dawn tested its voice. You think you're buried, the gardener said, not unkindly. But what if you're being given depth? He stood, wiping his hands on his trousers. The world celebrates what grows fast. Nature celebrates what grows deep. Which celebration do you want to attend? The question didn't hang in the air. It sank into the ground between them, like a seed finding its place. The gardener's eyes softened. Dawn was still only a suggestion, a lightning at the edge of the world. Let me tell you, he said, what the soil told me when I was where you stand. The old gardener's voice did not echo, it rooted. Forget this garden, he said. Listen to the forest. And as he spoke, the scent of city air, damp pavement and distant exhaust, melted into the fragrance of pine resin and wet earth. The rusted gate dissolved into a curtain of hanging moss. The oak's shadow deepened, spread, became the entire forest floor. They were no longer standing in a garden. They were standing in memory itself. It was mid-morning in the forest, not early, not late. The sun had climbed just high enough to slice through the canopy in sharp, golden columns. Mist still clung to the hollows, slow to release the night's coolness. The air was clean, sharp with oxygen, alive with the sound of 1,000 leaves drinking light. This was not a young forest. This was an ancient one, patient, deep-rooted, unhurried. The great northern forest stretched in every direction, a tapestry of shadow and illumination. On one side of a narrow clearing, the ground lay open to the sky, sun-drenched, warm, inviting. On the other, beneath the dense canopy of mother oaks, The earth lay in perpetual twilight, cool, moist, layered with centuries of fallen leaves. Between them stood the choice, quick warmth or deep shadow. From the highest branch of the oldest oak, 2 acorns fell on the same autumn morning. The first acorn, swift. It fell cleanly, landing with a soft tap in the center of the sunlit meadow. Light found it immediately, warmth wrapped around its shell. It settled into loose, fertile topsoil, welcoming, effortless earth that asked nothing of it. The second acorn, deep. A passing breeze caught it as it fell. It tumbled sideways, bounced once off a mossy stone, and rolled into a narrow, dark gap between 2 great roots of its mother tree. Shadow swallowed it whole. It came to rest not on soil, but on a bed of decaying leaves and cold clay, a place where light was memory, not reality. They lay there, these 2 seeds, one in light, one in dark, both full of the same potential, beginning their journeys in opposite worlds. Week 1. Swift drank warmth from the meadow's soil, its shells softening in the constant sun. By the 7th day, a pale root tip emerged, not digging deep, but spreading wide through the loose, forgiving earth. Deep in the crack between roots felt only damp chill. No sun reached it. It did not soften. It waited. On the 7th day, it sent a single exploratory tendril downward, not wide, but searching for purchase in the cold clay. Week 3. Swift's shoot broke the surface, a bright, eager green spear pointing skyward. It grew visibly, almost hourly, stretching toward the open sky. Its roots spread laterally, shallow, drinking from morning dew and surface moisture. Deep had not broken anything. Its first root now branched into 3, each probing deeper, navigating stone fragments and pockets of cold water. It was building a network in silence, a hidden architecture. Month 2. Swift stood a handspan tall, leaves unfurling like open palms. Bees visited. It swayed in every breeze, flexible but fragile. Its roots remained in the topsoil where the warmth was. Deep's root system had reached the depth of a man's forearm. It had encountered a seam of mineral-rich clay and began to thicken, to store, to anchor. Still no light, still only downward motion. Month 4. Swift was knee-high, proud, casting its own faint shadow by midday. It grew in spurts after each rain, its growth visible week to week. Deep finally sent up a pale, tentative shoot, not toward where light might be, but through the path of least resistance, a narrow channel of decayed wood and leaf mold. It moved slowly, without urgency, feeling its way upward through darkness. Spring rains. Swift drank eagerly, its leaves broadening, stem thickening visibly. It added inches in weeks. It felt like success. Deep's emerging shoot finally broke the surface, not in the meadow, but in the deep shade of the mother tree. It was pale, almost colorless, its first leaves small and tight. It did not rush to grow. It turned its first leaves toward the filtered green light that seeped through the canopy. Summer heat. The meadow baked. Swift's shallow roots struggled. Its leaves curled at the edges by noon each day. It grew slower, conserving water. Its early speed now a liability. Deep's leaves remained small, thick, waxy, designed not for maximum light, but for minimum water loss. Its deep roots drew from cool, damp soil, untouched by the sun. It grew steadily, almost imperceptibly, adding strength, not height. Autumn wind. A storm arrived. Swift swayed wildly, its root system too shallow to hold firm. It survived, but leaned permanently afterward, its trunk stressed where it met the ground. Deep stood unmoving. Its roots, deep and widespread, held it firm. The wind above scarcely reached the forest floor where it grew. It learned stability not from resisting force, but from being anchored below it. Winter cold. Frost came early. Swift sap, close to the surface, froze. Its leaves blackened overnight. It entered winter wounded. Deep, surrounded by the insulating mass of forest floor and deep earth, experienced only a gradual cooling. Its growth paused, but its systems remained alive, protected, waiting. Year 2. Swift regained its height by midsummer, but its trunk showed a permanent curve from the storm. It grew quickly when conditions were good, struggled when they were not. It lived season to season. Deep's trunk thickened slowly. It did not race upward. Instead, it grew a sturdy, gnarled base, its branches spreading laterally to gather the scattered light that found its way down. It became an expert at using little. Year 3. Drought arrived in earnest. The meadow turned to dust for weeks. Swift's leaves crisped. Its growth stopped entirely. It survived, but barely, a testament to endurance with resilience. In the forest, the drought was milder. The canopy held humidity. Deep's roots now tapped a groundwater seep it had discovered years before. It did not just survive, it grew. Slowly, surely, adding a ring of dense, strong wood. Year 5. Another drought, longer this time. The meadow's soil turned to powder. Swift's leaves found nothing. Its leaves fell in July. By August, its trunk was brittle. By September, it was dead, not with drama, but with silence. It had grown fast, but only in good conditions. It had never learned to reach deeper than the weather. Deep was now a young tree, not tall by meadow standards, but solid. Its roots were as vast below ground as its branches above. When the drought came, it slowed, but did not stop. It had been built for this. It had been built by this. Years became decades. Where the meadow had been, only hardy scrub grew, plants that required little, expected little. The forest deepened, and in its heart stood a tree that had begun in darkness, not towering above all others, but standing with a presence that spoke of depth, not height. Its trunk was thick, ridged with the memory of seasons. Its roots, had they been lifted from the earth, would have told a story of seeking, finding, and holding. It had not fought the shadow. It had learned its language. It had not raced the light. It had grown strong enough to wait for it. The old gardener's voice returned as a murmur, like roots shifting in soil. "And the forest remembers," he whispered, not as an ending, but as a handing over. The scent of pine dissolved into the damp morning air of the walled garden. The forest floor became moss-paved stones. The deep, shadowed earth became the dark soil beneath their feet. They stood again beneath the oak, the same oak, yet now they saw it differently. The man's hand was still open, holding the dark soil. But now that soil felt alive. It held memory, it held patience, it held the story he had just lived. His sister's eyes were on him, watching the change in his stillness. She saw it, the way his shoulders settled, not in defeat, but in recognition. The rejection letter lay forgotten on the ground between them, its words now just ink on paper. True dawn arrived not with a sudden burst, but as a gentle seeping. Light washed over the garden walls, touching the highest leaves first, then slowly descending, a quiet unveiling. The oak's shadow began to soften at its edges, not disappearing, but making room for what was coming. The man looked from the soil in his hand to the gardener's face, then to his sister's quiet gaze. He did not speak, but his eyes held a new kind of knowing, not the sharp clarity of answers, but the deep, resonant understanding of growth. He was no longer searching for light. He was remembering how to become strong in the places where light had not yet reached. Morning arrived fully now. The garden walls glowed warm in the early sun. Dew sparkled on spider webs strung between iron railings. The air carried the scent of wet stone and blooming jasmine from somewhere beyond the walls. The man knelt slowly, letting the soil fall from his hand back to the earth. It didn't scatter. It settled into the space it had left, as if returning home. His sister moved to stand beside him. She didn't touch his shoulder or offer words. Her presence alone was the bridge between what he had been and what he was becoming. The old man's voice was different now, not telling, but reflecting. "You live in a world that measures growth in visible inches," he said, his eyes on the oak's massive trunk. "Height celebrated over depth, speed praised over strength." He placed a hand on the tree's bark, feeling the ridges of centuries. But Swift did not die because it was weak. It died because it was never asked to become strong. His gaze moved to the man, then to his sister, then to the young woman who had just entered the garden unnoticed, a student with textbooks under her arm, pausing at the gate. "To those in the season of waiting," he said, his voice softening, "your time in shadow is not emptiness, it is accumulation. To those comparing their progress to others' visible growth, you are not behind, you are building what cannot be toppled. And to those who feel buried by circumstances," he let the morning bird song fill the pause, "what is placed upon you may become what roots you." He stepped back from the tree, his work done. Swift grew toward the sun, deep grew toward the source. Only one of them learned to survive when the sun disappeared.
For those 15-20, planting in uncertainty. A teenager closes a college rejection email, looks out at a rainy window. Her reflection shows not defeat, but curiosity. You ask, what if my path isn't straight? The deep root answers, neither was mine. For those 20-30, building in patience. A young entrepreneur watches competitors rise quickly, then stumble. He turns from his screen, picks up a notebook, begins mapping not a business plan, but a foundation. You wonder, why is my growth so slow? The forest floor whispers, I measure in decades, not days. For those 30-50, growing in depth. A professional passes over a promotion, chooses instead a mentorship role. She helps a younger colleague navigate their first shadowed season. You question, have I chosen wisely? The mature oak shows, my strongest branches grew after I stopped reaching and started deepening.
The man stood, brushing soil from his hands. He picked up the rejection letter, folded it once, and placed it in his pocket, not as a wound, but as a marker. From his bag, he took a small notebook, not the one with business plans, but an older one with blank pages. On the first page, he wrote, planted, today, location, shadow, expected emergence, unknown, direction, downward first. He closed the notebook, looked at his sister. I'm going to walk home the long way, he said, through the park. I want to see what's growing in the shade there. She nodded, not in permission, in recognition. The old man gathered his tools, a worn trowel, a pair of pruning shears, a canvas bag of seeds. As he walked toward the gate, the young student with textbooks stepped forward. Excuse me, she said softly. What grows best here, in the shadow? He stopped, smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. Everything that intends to last, he said. Then he was through the gate, leaving behind only the garden, the oak, and the quiet understanding taking root in those who remained. The man and his sister stood a moment longer. The student settled on a stone bench beneath the oak, opened not her textbook, but a blank journal. Sunlight now reached the garden floor in dappled patterns, not banishing the shadow, but dancing with it. From somewhere deep in the soil, an earthworm surfaced, moved slowly across the path, disappeared again into darkness. Life continued, not just in the light, especially in the dark.
When your growth feels invisible, do you measure your height or do you measure your depth? When others bloom while you're still underground, do you rush toward their light or do you trust your own timeline? And when life plants you in shadow, will you struggle toward the sun or will you become the kind of strong that sunlight never taught?
The student's journal open on the bench, her handwriting clear and steady. Some things need darkness to become what they're meant to be. If this story found you in your season of becoming, share it with someone growing in the shade. Comment below, are you in your swift season or your deep season? And subscribe for more stories that don't just inspire, they root.